From University of Maryland University College, this is Thursday Thoughts with Dr. Alan Drimmer. This series features faculty and friends of UMUC highlighting areas of academic expertise.
Welcome to Thursday Thoughts at University of Maryland University College. I'm Alan Drimmer, Chief Academic Officer, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Dan Mintz, Program Chair in Information Systems Management and Chairman of the Academic Advisory Board, the shared governance organization here at UMUC. So thank you for coming. It's good to have you.
Glad to be here, and glad to be here.
Excellent. Well, since I came here about 10 months ago, we've had a lot of conversations back and forth. I've gotten to know you and appreciate our partnership. Tell us a little bit about you, how you came to UMUC, what did you do before? Tell us a little bit about you.
So I'm sort of a classic UMUC, initially a classic UMUC adjunct faculty member. I had a lengthy career in information technology, both in the private sector in the DC area and also within the government. I was the Chief Information Officer for the U.S. Department of Transportation. One of the people at Transportation recommended that I teach graduate classes at what's called the iSchool at Syracuse University. And it seemed to me if I was going to do that, I did that for a couple of years, that I should be teaching for UMUC, where I had a master's anyway from. So I became a graduate adjunct at UMUC for 5 years. And then this full-time position came up in Information Systems Management, and I applied for it and was lucky to get it. The amusing thing of that, of course, is that I graduated from College Park, University of Maryland College Park, 100 years ago in Information Systems Management. So I tell people that my career arc extends all the way from College Park to Adelphi, which is, I could walk it.
And when did you teach your first online class?
It would be about 11 years ago. And that was the 2 years at Syracuse University. Oh. And then 9 years ago at UMUC.
Right.
And at Syracuse and at UMUC in the graduate class of the school, I had again the opportunity to actually create some of the classes that I taught. So I was tasked to recreate or to create the graduate classes at Syracuse, and I had the opportunity to redo and enhance the capstone class in the IT master's program I was teaching in.
Right. Right. And so then, how did you? So you've been in this program chair role now how long?
Just a little bit over 4 years. Just
Right.
had the fourth year, and I will say it's a wonderful opportunity because you get to touch everything that makes UMUC special. It's the program chairs hire and mentor and work with the faculty. We have responsibilities for the academic content of the program. We deal with the students and help them in terms of their issues and things like that, so that we get to touch everything a little bit.
And your program is one of the biggest ones. I think you have the biggest group of adjuncts. Don't you?
We're close to it. So it's an interesting major because I might say a second about that. It's an interesting major at UMUC. Because while it has a reasonable number of students who are majoring in it, about 1,500, between 1,500 and 2,000, we have a general education course that almost everyone in the university has to take, and we have an upper level course that almost all business managers majors have to take. So that means over the last 12 months, we had close to 19,000 enrollments, individual enrollments in the school. We have 300 sessions in the fall and spring, so it's an enormous logistical issue. For those who don't know, by the way, Information Systems Management sits in between technology and business. The graduates are supposed to be good at project management and are also supposed to be good at being able to tie strategic objectives of an organization to the IT technology things. And as technologies become more pervasive, it becomes a more important role. The classical end state of an IFSM or Management Information Systems major, as it's sometimes called, is to be a Chief Information Officer. Mm-hmm. As I joke with the other technology programs, eventually their graduates are going to work for my graduates. So.
Could you also say something about the Academic Advisory Board? That's a group that you chair with several others on the board, obviously. Tell us about that group and your involvement in that organization.
Well, again, it's been a great experience because it's allowed me to learn a lot about the institution that I otherwise wouldn't be able to get to because of all these logistical challenges that exist, and then all the demands of the academic demands of the program. So the Academic Advisory Board, or the AAB, is the shared governance advisory group established under the law of the state of Maryland. So our role is to represent the academic interests of the faculty and present them to the administration, such as yourself, President Mieres, and others, and whoever we have to. And we have representatives from all the stakeholder groups around the school that touch the faculty process. So we have program chairs and our full-time collegiates, both undergraduate and graduate school. We have an adjunct representative. We have a librarian. We have representatives from overseas, both in Europe and Asia. One of the great challenges I learned over time was, when do you schedule the meetings? Because we have to do these meetings online because people are scattered all around the world.
Right.
And how do you do it so that you don't force either Asia or Europe to be up too late or up too early? And it turns out daylight savings time is implemented differently everywhere. So it's been a great experience. It's a challenge because we have, in addition to the full-time staff, full-time faculty, we have close to over 4,000 adjuncts, again, all around the world. And trying to represent them and get their inputs is an ongoing issue that we work very hard at.
Right. So shifting gears, I understand that you're working on this project about academic quality, and tell me, you're interested in that topic. Where did that particular interest come from, and what are you doing on that?
So academic quality started off, so it's like a two-step process. So I got interested in the whole issue of academic quality from my work as a program chair in information systems management. Every 5 years, every program at UMUC has to do what's called an academic program review, which looks at their program, where it sits in the marketplace. Are they doing a good job? Are they being responsive to students, and so on? So that was that occurred a number of years ago for my program. So it got me thinking about the issue of, well, so what does that mean? I mean, the academic quality, who's against academic quality? But what exactly are we trying to measure, and why are we trying to measure it? So that started that conversation. And then I got interested a little beyond it, both because of my work with the Academic Advisory Board and also a number of initiatives that occurred at the school. So for example, a number of years ago, we moved from textbooks to open educational resources, and which was to save students money. Well, one of the questions that came up that we've been wrestling with is, so did we do a good job? Were there places where there were gaps? Is one better than the other? How do you measure that? How do you prioritize investments in that? And there weren't good answers to those questions. So that was of concern to me also. And one of the things that occurred to me was that when we look at the school and this is not a green field. We have conversations about academic quality all the time,
right?
But they tend to be what sometimes people refer to as cylinders of excellence. That is, there's individual stovepipe kinds of activities, but they're not necessarily communicated or agreed to as to what we're trying to accomplish. So we have Helio Campus, which is connected to us with ventures that does data studies. We have SILS, the Center for Instructional Learning and Student Success, which does a lot of research activities. We've had resources in the marketing organization trying to come up with success factors around students. Your organization added a resource to look at student retention. So we have all these individual activities that are going on associated with academic quality, but they're not connected yet. We both, in terms of the interaction isn't always there, and the institution as a whole doesn't necessarily agree upon how you should measure this stuff and how you should communicate.
So would you say before it was discussed, but it was very fragmented, and there wasn't a common vocabulary about what it might be?
Yes, and it becomes increasingly important. UMUC over the last decade or so has grown from being a very important organization to a very large organization, and it's become big enough that you can't, maybe 10, 15 years ago, everybody knew everybody, or the decision makers knew everything that was going on. It's too big for that now.
Right.
And we're making all these investment decisions, and so the question becomes, when do you want to put resources into this issue or this program as opposed to that program? One of the components of that is, are we achieving sufficient academic quality? And that requires everybody to agree upon what it is and how do you measure it.
Right. And I'm spending a lot of time now thinking about our strategic plan, and I've gone back and looked at previous strategic plans, and it's mentioned in every one. But to the point you're making, how people define it, where it lives, is it being tracked? That could be uneven, and it has looked uneven to me, which is why it's wonderful that you're doing this. I'm very happy. So tell us a little bit about how you're organizing these questions. Do you have a committee? You're involving other people. What's the process that you've been using to bring this together?
Right, and just something you had said, and then I'll answer that, is the other issue is, and this I think one of the things that has been a real positive is that you've been bringing is a continuing focus on it. There's a difference between creating a strategic plan and doing what one would refer to as report on the shelf. And it's not sufficient to just write it up as an objective. It has to be part of the day-to-day conversation over and over and over again. So what I've tried to do is I put together representatives from the undergraduate and graduate school, both of the various components of the full-time faculty, that is the program chairs and collegiates, and then we have what are called academic specialists that do a lot of the interaction with faculty and the initial interaction with faculty and students. Plus we got some representatives from what I might call stakeholder groups that are aware of these separate activities. I mentioned some of them already. And to make sure that we weren't duplicating something or going in a direction that wouldn't be able to get support. And we've been meeting every couple of weeks, and we did some investigations. We looked at what are our top competitors doing, at least in the public space. What do they say are their top priorities in academic quality? We identified, we did a literature search for what has currently been looked at, and then have had a report from a group of people on that. We also did a quick look at Middle States, which does our accreditation, and just looked at what are the standards they're imposing to see if that gives us some insight. So we've been doing that, and then we have one more. Oh, we've been doing presentations. We did some overseas, again, online presentations to get input from the faculty there, and then to the graduate and undergraduate school. And then we've typically used our social networking site, Engage, to get input from the adjunct faculty, again, who are geographically very dispersed. And we'll be doing that shortly and getting inputs. That has often been a good way to get that.
So what's been the reaction when as you bring all these groups together and start talking to them about it? Did they, were they excited? Were they skeptical? Confused? Energized? What's been their reaction?
You probably hit all the reactions
on
that list. So there are three things I think it's worth mentioning that was sort of interesting in terms of these things. One was skepticism. I mean, the reality is we've been talking about academic quality, and when we do it, we don't publicize what we're doing very well in terms of the organization. So people keep hearing that we're interested in it, but they don't see a result. So there was skepticism. Why is this going to be different? How are we going to overcome the systemic issues that have prevented it from the past?
Was that because there weren't metrics associated with it, and therefore the metrics weren't updated, and then people just didn't know?
So I'm going to alienate the people who say if you can't measure it, you can't manage it crowd, which I sometimes play part of it. I think the key issue is the communication issue. It isn't that we haven't had metrics. So I think metrics is going to be a very key focus here. So metrics are very important. The key issue is we don't talk about it enough. As we talk about it when we do the plan a little bit, but when we have faculty meetings and other things, is one of the topics academic quality.
Oh, I see, weaving it into the conversation.
People pay attention. People pay attention to what people talk about. And when the subjects that are on their mind that they bring up are the things people recognize over time are important to them. And academic quality was important only when it had to be important. Mm-hmm. And it's not that people didn't care, but we're so busy doing so many different things. So one issue was skepticism. That was one thing. And I'm going to mention one thing that sort of feeds into that. The second thing, however, was incredible passion. I mean, I sure have experienced this. When you talk to the faculty everywhere at UMUC, the one thing that we've got down pat is mission. People believe strongly and passionately in the mission of UMUC in terms of its impact on people who are otherwise not able to participate.
That's true.
In the economic mainstream, which is why we're here. And they desperately want to feel that what they're doing makes a difference and is of high quality.
Right.
Very passionate about that. And one of the challenges which I had underestimated was the complexity of the topic. The reality is it's not like there's a single point somewhere out there that describes academic quality. You just have to find that place. Academic quality is pervasive organizationally. It touches everything we do. And everybody has a different perspective on it. Some people believe in this, some people believe in that. And so the question is, how do you distill that and do something that's practical? And the other thing, being academics, they want it to be complete and perfect on the first day. And that's not how it's going to work. People who are around me all the time get bored by the fact that you'll hear crawl, walk, run. And organizations, just like us, like students, like people, have to do the first steps, learn the first thing before they can do the second thing. And we've got work to do to get to the second and third thing. So we're not going to have the perfect result, but we've got to do something that's interesting enough and valuable enough that will do that beginning step. And that's, I think, the ultimate challenge that I took from these interactions, this great passion, is how do we make sure that whatever we come up with is important enough that people think it's worth doing, but doable enough that we can succeed at it on day one. And I haven't quite got there yet. I'm working. That's still we're working on that. We haven't done the final report yet.
So maybe this would just be restating what you said, but why is this so hard? There are examples out there in the world of academic quality and things that lack quality, and why can't the group just figure it out? Look at the examples and come up with some general frameworks. I know it's more complex than that, but you've been spending time on this. So what makes it complex?
Well, to some extent, first of all, when you look at the academic literature and you look at some of the reports that have been done, and there's these very large online surveys of institutions that have looked at the issue of academic quality and what schools are reporting at. We're not so far behind, even at where we are. It turns out that this is an issue that people are grappling with at other institutions.
Right.
I suspect, as I said, my academic career spans, in terms of, in a faculty position, spans Syracuse to UMUC. So I don't have a 30-year career in the academic world. I have a feeling that bricks and mortar schools tended to feel that it was sufficient to have tenured faculty that generated research and had PhDs from good schools. And therefore, by definition, they were great. Everything was great.
Right.
So they didn't do that kind of analysis that we're doing. We have a lot of components that go into providing education. Faculty, which are absolutely critical and very important because they're the day-to-day interface to the student. But we also have the learning environment, that is our learning management system and how we provide that. Because we have such huge scale, we have content. we have to deal with, and how do you measure that? And we have a lot of support services, and how do we measure that? So one of the issues is picking and choosing. So one of the complexities is you could have 100 things to measure. Which are the ones you want to prioritize? And that takes judgment. And the other thing is you're doing proxies for what you want to measure. I mean, fundamentally, we're trying to measure, did we successfully cause a student to learn what we wanted them to learn? And as a result of that, did they get a better job? Or did they get an advancement of the job? Or did they get promoted, or some variation on that theme? That's not so easy to measure by itself. So you're always doing proxies for that. So which are the right proxies, and how do you combine it?
But going back to what you were saying at the beginning, I think it's fascinating. I never thought about it the way you described it. Because you're saying that really in the realm of traditional institutions, they had to deal less with this notion of academic quality because they thought that it related to other kinds of metrics like numbers of full-time faculty, SAT scores of incoming students, rankings and things like that. But is it the case that when you start thinking about institutions that serve the non-traditional students, where there's more flexibility around those metrics, then this issue of, well, if it's not that, what is it?
So first of all, I think they were wrong, the bricks and mortar schools. And in fact, there's a lot of evidence of that. You can't go very long. In today's world, particularly as bricks and mortar colleges and universities have gotten more and more expensive, the issue is it worth students piling up that debt to get that degree? Is it worth it or not? And there's, for traditional classical bricks and mortar research universities, that question gets asked a lot in the literature. And the answers are not always very positive. There's a lot of evidence that in fact the goals that were desirable didn't happen. So I would even say that I think the traditional way of doing measurement was probably wrong. If you have a very selective school and you have a lot of very smart students because you've only allowed certain smart students, I would contend you could probably put them in a classroom and forget the faculty and they'd still learn something because they're really smart students. But when you have an open university and you have wonderful students but still a whole variety of students, you have to start being more precise in terms of the measurements and think about that stuff.
Right.
And I think the difference is not that they didn't have to and we do. It is we all did, but we're realizing we're not resting on that laurel. We're starting with the premise that we have to do those measurements.
Right. So are there some people, when you raise these topics in your group, are there some people that say, well, academic quality is its outcomes, and so we look at the outcomes, we know if we have quality? Is that something some people say?
Yes, and the only challenge there is if we have 26 people that are participating in this work group actively, and then of course we're going to be reaching out. Well, I can promise you we have close to 26 answers, groups of answers. The classical, the blind man and the elephant. Everyone's feeling the elephant and feeling a different part, and therefore they have a different description. Everyone has a different focus. To some extent, we're going to touch on it, but on the issue of what is the UMUC vision and why are we here and what do we mean by education, which itself is not always the most obvious thing, which I think will be more the purview of the strategic planning process. But inevitably, that drives everything we're talking about, because what is it? Is it important to prepare people for jobs today? Is it important to prepare people for jobs 5 years from now? Is it important to do what aspects of the classical liberal education, which teaches people how to be good citizens and learn about critical thinking? How important is that? Is it more important or less important than the major they're working on? Those, to some extent, are above the pay grade of the working group, but they touch on it because these things are all intertwined.
Right.
And then what you want to measure gets intertwined. And there's disagreement, depending on who you talk to. But I will say that one of the things we've come up with, which is not violently creative, when we came up we're coming up with a context and we look at the customer base, the reality is the vast, vast, vast majority of the students, as far as all the information that we've gotten, are here because they want to change their situation economically. and we're that opportunity. So we have to do these other aspects of education, but we can't lose sight that the students and indirectly the employers, because we need to make sure we're educating the students in a way that the employers are going to want to hire them.
Right.
So we need to keep both of them in our vision. We have that dual customer. We'll say students first, employers first and half. Might be the thing, but they both have to be in our mind, and reaching out to them.
Right. So where are you in this process with the committee, and where do you think if you had to say right now where you think you're going to come out, where do you think you're going to come out on academic quality?
So hopefully we won't go too far beyond our remit. We've come up with sort of a context which we're testing on the input. So I have one large set of inputs that we're going to get from the adjunct faculty, which will integrate, and this may change what I'm saying. So we think we're going to be focused on how do we help the students and how do we make sure they meet employer expectations. We've looked at 4 areas in the context of it. How do we optimize the involvement of faculty? How do we optimize the learning environment, which would include our learning management system and then the aspects around the learning environment, which is because we also teach online and in person, both of those kind of components. How do we optimize the academic programs? And, their course design and things like that. And finally, how do we optimize support services that relate to that? So that'll be sort of the context around that. And our hope was we're going to have a prioritized set of metrics, but also we may have some prioritized set of initiatives that are not exactly a metric. That is, it may be you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do faculty development well in order to help faculty.
So activities that would drive the metrics.
Yes, so we'll have 2 lists that'll do that, that'll come out of that. Our hope so it'll be that we'll have, the goal will have those 2 lists. Context was 2 prioritized lists, which will probably will be a little bit longer than we like, but we'll try and have the top priorities be obvious.
Right. Well, it's a lot of work. Will you ever volunteer for anything again?
Yeah, well, one of the things I've learned is no. I again, for people who are, for the people who are listening to this or see this that are not at UMUC, I can't begin to tell you how positive it is to be able to actually be able to reach out, and broadly speaking, into the community. Talking to the faculty is a great thing. In the same way, I tell people, I never went to my own college commencements, but I've been to as many of the UMUC college commencements that I've been at. And something that President Mieri said at the first one that I went to, which really struck me, he said at a traditional school, parents come to cheer on their kids. At our school, the kids come to cheer on their parents. And it's for all the extra work, the opportunity to interact with people about that is very special. It was a wonderful thing to be able to do.
It is. Lastly, just to wrap up, what have you learned from this process that might help others at other schools that would be thinking about, taking a deep dive into this terrain? What could you share to help them?
So I think, again, one of the things are make sure that you reach out to all the stakeholders, people who are touching as much as possible, try and get some insights. You want to do that because you're going to want them to be comfortable with what you come up with, so there's a governance issue. But also, it turns out if you talk to people who care and are smart, you'll learn something new. You may think you know, but you don't know. So that's one thing. And the second thing is to know that you're going to be surprised at some of the things that you come up with. And again, I already mentioned one. It is useful to understand you're going to not start with perfection. And the result can't be a one-off report. What I hope will come out of this, I hope that this work group effort will impact on the strategic plan. I mean, that's one thing I hope it does. I hope it impacts on the communication plan. That is, that it'll be something that will be communicated on an ongoing basis. I think it will. It feels like it will. And I hope that a year from now we can say, and then step 2 is something. It has to eventually change the culture of the organization.
Have an impact on other initiatives
Yes.
that go on. Right. Well,
Yes.
I think if it's integrated into the plan, I think it's set up to do that. And you've spent a lot of time on this. It's important. It's worthy. It's the right time. But you've gotten the word out. You've gotten some enthusiasm about it. You, as we can all see, you're excited and you're bringing energy to it, and I think that sends a nice signal. So it's infectious and it's very positive. Thank you. I'm delighted.
Yep. I was glad. Even though I complain about it, I was glad to be asked. And
Usually,
it's
I only
been
see you this excited about the Capitals. Usually, this is but here, this is your second passion after the Capitals. I think.
I believe the correct title is the Stanley Cup champion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Capitals.
Right. But thank you for joining us, and it's been wonderful, and we've learned a lot. And thank you for joining us on Thursday Thoughts.
Thanks for watching Thursday Thoughts with Dr. Alan Drimmer. This has been a production of University of Maryland University College.